Thank you so much for the comment about casting on for the panel mode. I'm going to record it from this view, and this might make it hopefully a little bit easier to learn how to cast on. So your cast on is like your chain. If you're crocheting, that's kind of your foundation. So then the machine's able to create the stitches as you make your rows. So for the panel mode, you want to make sure your button is up, because we're at P for panel and T is for tube. So panel is up. And then I like to set the machine when I'm cranking back. The white needle's here, I can't go any further. That's how you know you're in panel mode. And then when you crank forward, it will stop you as well. So you can't continuously go around and around in a tube. So I like to set my machine to start my cast on here, so I'm cranking forward. That's just me personally, because I'm starting from 1 and counting up. So I have my machine marked as well, because to make the biggest and use the most needles that I feel works the best is to start at your 3rd needle and you're going to end at your 46th needle. So I have those marked with a Sharpie with a line. And then I have these pegs marked as well as a visual that these are my starting and stopping points. And then for the 47th, the 48th, the 1st and 2nd needle, I just have a little dot with a Sharpie just as a visual for me to remember no yarn goes on these. So to start with your cast on, we're going to start by cranking forward at our 3rd needle. And so I take my yarn, this is a number 3 weighted yarn, a lightweight yarn, and this one is really nice because since it's smaller, it works easier in the machine. So we're not going to do a project, we're just going to practice casting on and making a few rows. So this is what I recommend to do, is just to practice. Here's our 3rd needle. We want to catch that needle with our yarn. And let me move this a little bit forward so you can see now. We're going to catch him in the front, so he's on the needle, right? And now we're going to crank forward, and we're going to go to our 4th needle, and we're going to go behind him. And then we're going to go in front of our 5th, behind the 6th, in front of the 7th, behind the 8th, and so on. So you're going under and over each needle 1 time around. And you don't want it really loose, and you don't want to be pulling super tight. You just kind of want it to be just like touching the front or the back side of the needle. But it's important to make sure when you're casting on, it's going underneath so it can hook. And so it's every other one is your cast on. And I believe you have to do this. I don't know any other way of how to cast on. And you want to make sure you do every other, and then it should look like this, where if you have your pegs, it's like 2, and then skip, 2, skip, 2, skip, 2, skip, all the way around till we get to our 46th needle. And so if you see, here's my line. So that's just kind of a nice visual. There's my 46th needle. We're going to go around. I have my line at my peg. That's where I know this yarn's going to stop. We're not going to go anymore. Now I'm just going to move my camera angle a little bit so you can see where the yarn needs to go from here to do our first row. So once we're here, we're at our 46th needle. Now we need to put our yarn in the yarn holder, and you want to make sure then it's also in your yarn tensioner. And then the yarn needs to be all the way down in the front here so it catches that needle. And then we're going to start cranking back towards us, and now it's caught that needle, and it's going to start catching all the other needles too. Now you may need to just help that piece of yarn come down and around this peg before it catches this next needle so it's doing the correct stitch. And you'll see as it's going around, it's now catching them all. And if it's done it correctly, now it's going to look like this, where it's kind of making this X shape or an over and under every other needle. It's kind of like a circle under, circle under. This is how it should look. And then once we get back to our start, there's our peg showing that's where we end. It's now going to wrap around that peg. And then we're going to start cranking it forward again. It's going to go around the peg a second time right there. And now we're starting our next row. And now if it's making it correctly, it's going to look like this on every single needle now. So now we're back. We have our last peg. And now here, want to make sure, sometimes you have to help it with the loom pick to make sure that loop is down and around those two tiny pegs. Now it's going to go over this peg once. We stop, and now we start cranking back. On this peg here, it's going to go around that peg again and catch our needle. And now we're making our next row. And now you can make as many rows as you need to, going back and forth. And again, you might just have to help out that 3rd and 46th needle with your loom pick. The yarn can just get caught on those just because there's not enough weight yet. And then you always want to make sure it's wrapping around twice, those beginning and ending pegs, and that's what makes that side knit so it doesn't unravel either. So what I did is I just sat, I put on a good movie that I love, and I just practiced casting on and making some few rows. And then I would probably mess up, I would take it all off, and I would start all over again. And I wasn't trying to make a project, I was just trying to get used to casting on and figuring out how my machine worked. So I hope this helps. I love all the comments and the questions. Thank you so much for watching, and happy crafting.